First round robin is almost complete, and with the teams between 4th and 7th place only one win apart, one weekend could mean the difference between playoffs or bust. The audience is geared up and ready to go for Week 5, as the tattoos have made it onto the foreheads, and we've got some fans visiting from ZBC High School in Denmark, where they study game design. They're hyped to see Game 1, where Impact and Team Liquid will face off against Darshan and Counterlogic Gaming. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NA LCS Countdown, where for 30 minutes we break down the news of the day, share our thoughts on today's hype matchups until the timer reaches 0, and we jump into Champion Select. Let's kick things off by checking out our schedule for the week. Team Liquid starts the day versus Counterlogic Gaming, then 100 Thieves faces off against Echo Fox, Cloud9, and TSM in Game 3. Of course, we've got 2 more matches before we close out the first round robin. And we'll be back for another day of games tomorrow, starting at our new Sunday start time. Again, I repeat, new Sunday start time, 12 p.m. PST with Clutch Gaming versus TSM. The NA LCS Lounge stream will be back tomorrow with Kobe, Sven, and Mithy, bringing you Game 3, Cloud9 versus Echo Fox, tomorrow afternoon. Now, Avli May caught up with Team Liquid's coach to hear about how their team will bounce back this week.
Thanks, guys. I just spoke with Team Liquid's coach, Kane, about the team's performance last week. They went 0-2, looked a little bit rough around the edges, and he mainly attributed their poor performance to struggling from playing from behind, getting within their own heads, and not really knowing what to do next in the game. He said they are feeling pretty confident this week, going up against CLG, first game of the day, and the 4 words that he said: win lane, win game. Back to you.
Win lane, win game. That's one way to do it. We'll see if Team Liquid can bounce back after going 0-2 last week. Tough one for them.
Yeah, and it seems like they're falling into a pattern here where they have a really successful stretch followed by a bad stretch where apparently they just win too much and they don't know how to play from behind. But I actually wish that I would have heard some more from Kane there about how they're actually addressing the problems, other than let's just never fall behind, because inevitably something bad will happen and you will fall behind, and they can't have that. But what they did get last week was another reminder, another kick in the butt of what can go wrong to hopefully prevent it in the future. And based on the patterns, this should be a big up week for them.
It's a little scary, too, given that they did lose 2 games to the top teams in the league last week. So you want to be like, oh, yeah, that's understandable. But for a team that's supposed to be competing for the #1 spot, that is a little damning to lose 2 of the most important matches of your split.
Right, 2 games out of first means they cannot catch first at the end of the first round robin. CLG, on the other hand, other side of this matchup, they're much further down in the standings, looking to improve as well.
Yeah, and CLG are honestly a mess right now. They're 3 wins, 4 losses, and I have them as pretty big underdogs in this game. And the reason I say that they're a bit of a mess is they're playing these really hard to execute team compositions when they're failing to execute some pretty basic things later in the game about their strategies. So either I want to see them play simpler things. I do want to see them play simpler things, because I think they're actually good enough to get small advantages and then be able to close them out.
Yeah, I mean, they're tied for first most unique champion picks, and this is not like a last place team like struggling to find a win, picking off the wall stuff like you kind of see out of Golden Guardians. These guys should be competing for a playoff spot. Keep it simple, stupid. Like you said, just pick some really easy to execute comps. You don't need to go for these crazy Fiora mid things because you can't play them well right now. Yeah. Pick something a little simple.
A few thoughts on that matchup going into today, though. Echo Fox and Cloud9 are the ones tied for first, with Team Liquid sitting in 3rd, while 100 Thieves, Clutch Gaming, and TSM share 4th at 4-4. Now, later on in the day, the first place Cloud9 faced TSM, who have made a slow climb into that top 6.
Yeah, and it's a little weird because we're not used to seeing TSM be underdogs in this matchup. They're almost always the favorites any split that they're in. Even in a lot of power rankings starting the season out, they were supposed to be the #1 team, but they are still struggling to really find their footing thus far in the season.
Yeah, and it's so strange watching the team after them having these 2 games where they had big leads against Echo Fox and against Clutch and then losing those games. And I actually think TSM are the best team at getting individual advantages, but the worst team at playing through those advantages, which kind of explains itself when you see how big those 15-minute gold differences are, and they're still 4-4. It's because they are really bad at closing out games.
And on the flip side, C9 is kind of the complete opposite story. They have a lot of individual talent. That was probably the one thing people were concerned about with Licorice and Sven coming in. That has been fine, and then they've been phenomenal at taking any lead that they find somewhere on the map and moving it around. That's why they have such great Drake control, such great Baron control, their KDAs, their first 3 tower rates. That all comes off the back of the fact that they work perfectly as a unit.
I think the striking thing then for me is the fact that the conversation right now isn't about Jensen versus Bjergsen. Let's remember these 2 guys were only separated by a few points when it came to MVP voting in the past, and yet this is not the focus of the matchup? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's because both these guys are doing their jobs right now, and the job of a mid lane isn't particularly exciting or a conversation starter. He shoved out the wave and he roamed, or he shoved out the wave and he team fought well. So if the rest of your team is not in a position to execute on that roam or in a position for your team fighting to be successful, you're not going to be talking about the guy. And since C9 is in those positions, they've won more games. I think they're both performing pretty well, but it's not a standout performance because of the meta right now.
You're right. I think it's absolutely the case where it's hard to say that either of these guys are playing worse than they did last split, but it's just not in a situation where they can shine as much as they did previously.
The last piece of the puzzle is that for Sven Skaren, it's somewhat of a revenge matchup. He's been pretty vocal that he feels more enabled on this Cloud9 squad.
TSM always had good results in NA, and they always made the finals, so you don't really want to let that legacy down. I think I performed pretty good on TSM overall, if you think about the 2 years I was in, but the community really just sees your last event.
Sven is low. He's going to be taken down here. Sven Skaren pop.
Right onto Sven Skaren, doesn't have a chance to even get out of it.
Just like yesterday, it's Sven Skaren that ends up going down.
I didn't really want to be a part of the team that badly anymore after performing like that. I didn't feel like I was at home in TSM anymore. The way I found out I wasn't going to be in TSM was Andy told me one day that Mike Young is going to play. Overall, I'm quite happy that TSM found a new jungler and they let me go.
I can't go for this. I'm not going to do it. Just give it up. Behind now. Oh, wait.
Oh,
Sven Skaren steals the Baron! Cloud9 come up huge!
I feel like in Cloud9 right now, my playstyle is more aggressive with calculations. I feel like my team really trusts me.
They're fighting. Down me. Okay, look at twist. I have twist. Don't flash on the guy. No jump. One twist, stop. I have stun. I'm stunning too. Twist. Nice.
I really feel like Cloud9 is the place where I can grow most as a person and I can be more of a leader. Going into the game against TSM, I feel happy to finally meet them because so long I've seen them like struggle, and I just really want to win against my old team.
I think it's very much the case where in League of Legends, you sometimes see teams and players stagnate after being on a team for so long. They hit this kind of pinnacle, they come down a little bit, and then they just don't ever reach that high again. I think you've seen this a couple times, especially in the NA LCS. Smithy needs to get off CLG, Sven needs to get off TSM. They need a change of scenery to kind of revitalize themselves and their rosters respectively.
I mean, again, the thing that jumps out at me the most is how much more I'm seeing him smile on stage.
Yeah.
And I say it all the time, smiles win games, and I really do believe that it's clear Sven Skaren's winning a heck of a lot more games this time around. Now, as we enter week 5 of the spring split, I think it's a perfect time to make some sweeping generalizations about the league in another edition of Overreaction. So a quick reminder how this works. I make some kind of statement. These guys tell me whether or not I'm overreacting. It's as simple as that. So first statement of the day, Dardoch is the best jungler in NA.
Reasonable.
Appropriate reaction, James. Very appropriate reaction. I think
Yes.
he is performing the most on Zac, but he keeps getting that pick, and he is far and away the best Zac in the league. He's also been playing his other matchups perfectly fine as well. His team is living and dying based off his engages a lot of the time, and they've won a lot of these games through their late game.
Yeah, and a lot of times if I would tell you that Dardoch has the most kills of any jungler in the NA LCS, you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. But you'd be surprised when he also has the fewest deaths of the guys who have started all of the games. So he's playing a very calculated level on what seems to be uncalculated team, because he has the lowest death percentage on his team as well. Like, he's been very smart with the chaotic game of Echo Fox.
I mean, I'm going to make the comparison, but it's reminiscent of Meteos Zac play, the way that we're watching him play Zac in the current meta, near deathless on that champion. Now, the next statement, this is a big one. Mid lane is inconsequential.
I'd say that is an overreaction.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not to say that mid lane is super important right now. Having a bad mid laner is still a big detriment to your team because they have a very important role in pressuring the side lanes and being the main damage contributor in team fights. With that being said, the difference that the top mid laners can have over the middle mid laners is pretty small right now because there's not too much you can do about being Talia and hitting that back wave of minions so you can roam, like better than Bjergsen or worse than Jensen, right? It's going to be about the same no matter who's playing it for that part of the game.
So an overreaction would call it inconsequential. What if I were to say it's less or the least consequential it's ever been in pro play, Mark?
Least ever, I would have to think a lot more about every single meta that we've seen, but
Fair
it
enough.
is at a time where it's trended down over the last couple seasons. If you look back at old seasons when it was best of one, the amount of solo kills that happened in mid lane, this is the lowest we've seen at this point in the season. And they're down generally across the board, and it results in what a lot of people have identified as a much more team-focused game at this point. Talias are still getting plenty of kills. There's still plenty of kills happening in the game, but it's not like, oh, I solo killed you and you weren't ready for it. Like you said, I pushed and I coordinated with my team to get a big dive off in the top or bot lane.
All right, the final statement for this one, FlyQuest, they're going to make playoffs.
I tend to agree. Although, if you said this last week, I would have called it an overreaction.
Yeah, no, it's not an overreaction.
Okay.
No, FlyQuest will make playoffs.
There it is.
Yeah.
Boom. You think that they will make it into the top 6 by the end of the regular season?
Yeah, I like how their team's looking right now, given the fact that Fly joined them literally last week. And he was someone that people were hyping up in the preseason about how well this team all gelled together. We saw a glimpse of it last week where they were able to push C9 further than a lot of teams have been able to do it. And with how many teams are clearly struggling in the middle pack right now, Clutch doesn't look great, 100 Thieves doesn't look great, CLG doesn't look great. I really do believe this team will make it.
They're only one game out of that middle pack. Jat, which of those teams in the middle pack do you think are most in danger of losing their playoff spot to FlyQuest?
There's a lot of them. Clutch and 100 Thieves are there, but also COG if they don't clean up their play.
All right, there you have it. Fair enough. We're going to step away for a quick break. When we return, we'll take a look at the new patch, the Swain rework, and listen in on the comms for Golden Guardian's first win. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the NA LCS Countdown. About 15 minutes away from Champ Select, and with 8.3 came some changes to the jungle and popular mid laners, but introduced the Swain rework as well. So we're calling upon Azael to give his thoughts on the pick. And I want to make clear, now we didn't just grab any old analyst for this segment, but a bona fide 100% verified Swain main from 2016 to break down the rework. There you see it.
Yeah,
best Swain in NA, Azael.
Wasn't that hard
Great job, dude.
to be the best out of champion in 2016. I don't know what the big deal is.
2016 was the year to do it, I guess. But hey, Azael, you got all that Swain info swirling around in that big brain of yours. I want you to break it down for me. How do we make this champ work after the rework?
Well, before we get into that, we should take a little look at the kit so we can talk about how the new kit does actually come together. It's mostly about, for your damage, spamming out your Qs. It's kind of this little AoE zap ability. The W there is going to harvest the soul fragments, which increases the power of your ultimate. And the E is such a key ability here. That root is really what sets everything up, and that is kind of the make or break part of the kit. It's pretty important to be able to hit that to actually pull off the combo, which we can take a look at here. And so much of it all is revolving around, can you hit the E or not? Because the W is such a long delay that if you cannot hit this E, you will not land your W, you will not be able to pull off the full combo. And when you start playing against better and better players who understand how to properly dodge out against this, as you see the Jax moving forward towards the Swain, the E is going to actually catch on those ranged minions. And when you miss the E, you cannot hit the W, which means you don't have access to your passive as well. The passive allows you to pull people in, also harvesting more soul fragments, which makes your ultimate that much more powerful. So that's where you really start to struggle when you start playing against better and better players. And there are kind of some stopgaps for that, some ways that really kind of help with that, and that's playing with people who have heavy CC. So if you are not able to hit the E, but you're playing with someone like a Sejuani, well, they can activate your passive for you. They can set you up to be able to hit your claw and hit your W and actually pull off the full combo. But the problem is you're not always going to have that. And when I'm looking at the highest levels where these players are going to be able to consistently dodge out, are going to understand how the champion works and be able to avoid that claw consistently, you're left with essentially one ability. If the E misses, you can't hit your W, you have your Q, and that's about it. And Skara, Shifter, both having their own struggles. I think a lot of pros are having struggles with this champion, making it work at that high level, and that's why I just don't really see it coming into the LCS until it maybe gets some more buffs. Back to you guys at the desk.
All right, so probably not for competitive play,
Bummer.
but a few thoughts on how or why Swain could work or should work Skara, Shifter having a little difficulty.
I mean, those guys, there's a reason they're not on the LCS
right?
anymore,
They've fallen off a little bit. Skara, you're not welcome back on the desk anymore if you can't win with Swain. I've been getting crushed by Swains and solo queue recently.
Yeah, so there you go.
I wonder why.
And I'm basically a pro. So, all right, along with the integration of Swain, we saw nerfs to some staple picks in the NA LCS. And I know, Mark, that you're supercharged on one of those changes.
Yes, Ryze does not have this BS combination anymore. That should be a dead Ryze. And from now on, 8.3, that will be. Once again, here, actually not quite as much because the Zhonya's probably would have been just
died.
Yeah, no, he's got a body blocking situation. Probably fine there, but either way, the split push Ryze, who gets caught by 5 people and presses 2 buttons and gets out free, is gone. Thank God. It's the only champion in the game that really has that level of escapability from terrible situations. Plenty of champs can like ult out of stuff, but you can usually interrupt them. There is no way to stop a Ryze unless you full combo 100-0 while he's CC'd. And the fact that that's out is really good for the game.
Won't be seeing that anymore. We also saw some nerfs to the jungle, Jat. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, so the 2 main junglers from last patch, Sejuani and Jarvan, both received nerfs. Sejuani with the cooldown on the Q and Jarvan with the armor being reduced. So I think Sejuani is nerfed because she doesn't have nearly as much teamfight mobility, but we'll still see her because her damages and clear speed is pretty much untouched. But when I look at Jarvan, I think he now gets pushed out more by Zac and Jax because he just won't have enough health to do safe early ganks, and the counter ganks become way more valuable with Jarvan being low. A little armor goes a long way on that guy, so I think he's actually kind of pushed out a fair bit of the meta right now.
All right, they do get nerfed, but do we think this really changes the jungle pool at all? Maybe just changes priority a bit?
It changes the priority, because I think there's a lot of junglers that can still come right back in. As I mentioned, Jax, I think, rises in priority. Zac, even Kha'Zix goes up a little bit with Jarvan out of there.
All righty, well, with all these changes to the jungle picks, I'd like to challenge you to make another champion work. Last week, we had an overwhelming amount of tweets for Volibear of all champions, and it just so happens that we have a Volibear expert on the desk. Jad,
I love Volibear.
If I recall correctly, you were the best Volibear in 2016.
Man.
I was. Proof is right there.
Mr. Stingyo Girl, #2 on a lot of champions in the world.
Jack of all trades, master of none, Mr. Stingyo Girl. But Jack, tops the tables for Volibear. How do we make this champ work?
All right, so first off, I think a lot of people have the wrong mindset when they play Volibear. He is a bruiser who relies on auto attacks for damage, not a tank who initiates. So the things that are best with him you can see there are Maokai to be a primary initiator, or Lulu to help him get there, or just help with the Ardent Sensor. I have Aftershock as the keystone there because the temporary tankiness is great because you shouldn't actually be building full tank on him. And Wit's End, I think, is the best Volibear item you can build.
My God, when Wit's End is the crucial part of a build.
Here's why. That ultimate he's about to activate right here, boom. At max rank, 165 magic damage on hit. Name me another ability that does 165
Kog'Maw
damage
W
on hit.
used to. Maybe.
That's a percentage. It's not 165. It doesn't count. So it's really important to be able to get your auto attacks off and fit a Wit's End in the build. So you need to bide your time on the outside of fights, go in for a squishy, pop your ult, and just duel them. He loses so few duels if you're able to go an attack speed build with Wit's End.
Yeah, he doesn't lose very many duels, but that's why I don't like him in the jungle. His clear speed's still not very impressive. Take him top, especially with the changes coming in 8.4 most likely. Really gonna revitalize how you can play him.
Where's your Wit's End?
You don't. I gotta Triforce first, buddy. You don't need it.
It's the crucial part of the build, Mark. Weren't you paying attention?
No, you don't need that. All right, you get a Triforce. It's much better. You want to get a little bit of movement speed in there early on. The Triforce with the Phage can do that pretty well. You can go Aftershock or Grasp of the Undying, depending on the matchup. Generally, you want to play him into melee matchups, and then he's getting a Q buff that allows him to stick on targets easier. His W is getting the refund not only on monsters but minions now, and then his E is getting this really nice interactability change where he can knock people out of mobility. So matchups like Camille, which were really tough before, might get changed because they can't E you anymore as long as your E is on up and off cooldown.
Yeah, and this champion's still probably a fair bit away from pro play, but if you want to make it work,
we're trying to make it work.
Wit's End.
For you guys at home, we're trying to make it work. Keep tweeting those champions that you want to see become viable, and I'll keep extending the challenge to these two analysts. We'll see if 8.3 affects the performances of any of our players that we've labeled as our ones to watch. For Week 5, they are Someday, Impact, JJ, Smoothie, and Arrow. First up, 100 Thieves Sunday.
Yep, and he was a guy who has been struggling a little bit to stand out. When you picked him up on this roster, you expected him to be a monster threat, but the team doesn't play around him very much. He has a hard time getting involved, and he's not really dominating people in the 1v1 either, as it feels like he's kind of become an afterthought in the team's playstyle, which is not really what we were expecting out of him. So I would love to see him take a more C9 approach, give him counter picks, put resources up there, don't spend everything. You know, you have Ryu, Afro, and Meteos, who should all want to go up to the top side and help him out.
Yeah, Summoners just had such a small amount of map pressure. It has to get better.
Okay, moving right along, we find ourselves with another top laner, this time Team Liquid's Impact.
Yeah, and this guy had a rough week last week, not really getting going, and it's a similar trend where you're expecting a lot of pressure for Impact, but when he falls behind, a lot of the Team Liquid team crumbles a little bit, and we're just not used to seeing him in this situation where he is getting killed and dying a fair bit, so another guy who does need to step up this week.
Made his debut last week. Next up, we've got JJ from FlyQuest.
And he's subbed in against C9 and actually looked pretty good. They almost won that game. He was involved in setting up some dives in the bot lane. All things considered, a pretty good performance given the quality of opponent he was up against. FlyQuest, we're talking about this team that we're looking out for to rise in the standings, make a playoff push, and settling that support debate is going to be a key part of that because it still is between him and Stunt on which they end up going for.
Now, you mentioned the fact that he played against Smoothie. That's the next guy we're taking a look at. MVP candidate?
I think absolutely, especially if C9 continues to win and if they can come out on top of TSM today. And that's going to be one of the big factors because we mentioned how TSM can get individual advantages on a lot of teams, but it's on Smoothie and the rest of C9 to win the game after your team is either splitting or a little bit ahead in the early game. And Smoothie's been the best at that.
All right, lastly, we're taking a look at Optics Arrow.
And this is a team that feels like they're close to turning things around, all things considered. They have what looks like good late game. They're starting to figure out their early game. Power of Evil and Arrow are no joke as carry threats come the late game, but there's still something missing and they're just not quite there. So hopefully Arrow can step up and carry his team a little bit harder in that early game, but he's had a pretty good performance thus far in the season.
Well, tomorrow marks the halfway point of the split, so we want to hear from you. Who is your mid-season MVP and why? We'll share your tweets in the discussion once the first round robin concludes. Now, let's throw it over to this week's Mic Check, which listens in on how Golden Guardians picked up their first win.
We go down together. What is this?
I'm not going down with you. You go down, you're going down alone.
You feel good about Alawi?
Yeah, I feel good about Alawi. Alright, let's do it out.
Right, let's lock it in.
Shout out to Quas.
It's Camille jungle, Alawi top.
Thank God I picked third.
I can level 6 now.
Okay. I have heal for you. I have heal for you. We're on mid. Got him. Nice, guys. Nice. Good job. Good shit. He flash healed.
I can go, yeah.
I'm gonna move up. Cody later.
Yeah, we're going on mid.
If you look for you. Coming.
Tarek's moving first. Tarek's moving first.
We win this?
You have flash.
I'm coming. Keep fighting. I'm coming.
Stunning.
I can shield you if you walk down. Nice.
He's no push. I'm gonna play, okay?
Yeah,
I don't have any mana, but we can just beat him down.
No flash. I'm trying to run. Get out. I should have. Tell me if Ezreal ult. Yeah. He doesn't have it. They started it? No, we're here. Let's kill the vision. Let's go vision. I can move for vision after this wave. I can look here. Okay.
We're going in.
Can you ult him? I ulted you. I'm gonna kill. Let's hear. We win.
Nice.
I got dragon. Okay. Where's Sejuani?
I can take it.
That's okay. Let me zone solo. Okay. You guys go up. 5K, 3K.
We're burning a soul.
Finish it.
Okay, nice.
We can fight. Yeah, go right. Careful. Sejuani.
Okay, we're here. Split.
Nice. Hey, calm down. We're good with this. We can go tier 2. Okay, push. Chen, you can go. Chen, move forward.
They're all 5 here.
I'm looking, guys. Okay.
We can take it slow too.
They're off. Yo, I shield Chen. Come back. Come right.
Backing off.
I got ult.
Nice. 0.
Move forward. A 0.
Keep go. I can go forward.
A 0. Go left.
Hey, we can enter bot too.
Let's go bot. Actually, Bear. I'm in their base, guys.
Yeah. We're
coming. Sam, you're by yourself.
I think Sam can end it.
I'm trying to end. Okay, we win. Let's go. Yeah, coming. End the game. Kill them.
Kill these guys.
Let's fucking go, baby! Yeah! Let's fucking go! Finally won again.
Holy shit, guys. They will do it and get themselves on the board. The smile on High's face says it all, Kobe.
Just under 3 minutes.
End the game, kill him.
Some mismatch excitement levels, yeah. A little different.
They got the W. They got the W, that's all that matters. Just 3 minutes to go until Champions Club. Let's get your predictions up on the screen here. Any difference? With only one game separating in the season totals.
You gotta do a different prediction every once in a while, man.
Yeah.
Mark, come on, buddy.
What? Why is it on me?
You're the one who's losing.
By 1. I'm not gonna go.
So a lot of these predictions are actually pretty agonizing to pick. I think Cloud9 versus TSM is super close. You never know what's gonna happen with COG. Clutch Gaming and FlyQuest. FlyQuest has the worst record, and Golden Guardians looked pretty good last week. So there's a lot of times where you're thinking about flipping that coin, but we're apparently in full.
But no, but neither of you did.
Just
Neither of you pulled the trigger on flipping the coin. Taking a look at that first match, let's get some win conditions for both of our teams. Mark, I'm going to hand you CLG. Jack, you're going to get Team Liquid.
Yeah, CLG obviously on the back foot has a little bit more work to do here. So the two things I want them to do, get those early leads that they've been getting all this time. Tony has great level 1s. Rainover is great at exploiting early jungle advantages just with his perfect pathing and all that stuff. And then Darshan tends to get leads. But after you get that lead, please focus on the bot side a little bit more. We talk about how Team Liquid feels like they struggle when they fall behind, especially around double lift. So go down there, take some of that top side pressure that you're generating, and hopefully you can get some big TP plays off on the bot side because their super tunnel vision on top isn't working.
How does Team Liquid respond?
They have to get Impact ahead somehow, and this isn't normally what you say when you're on a Team Liquid team, but after what happened last week, I think it's huge for their team morale. I think something super interesting as well is they've been first picking Gangplank on blue side almost every time and then allowing the other team to get that counter pick. They've opted to go red side this game, so they're probably opting out of that GP first pick choice and probably giving Impact counter pick. So it's pretty important that he succeeds.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious given that Darshan has been fantastic early on in the season in terms of getting those leads. So they want a safer situation up there in the top side because that feels like CLG's main game plan.
All righty, we close out the first round robin today. Let's toss it out to the casters to get us into game 1.